All right, let's dive into Leviticus 22. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Leviticus, ancient rules, lots of details, but trust me on this one. This chapter reads more like a screenplay. It's a seriously cinematic journey into what it means to be set apart, to be holy, and it reveals the incredibly high price of approaching a holy God.
So, the whole thing really boils down to this one huge question. What does it actually take to approach God? What are the rules of engagement? Well, Leviticus 22 lays out a blueprint that is incredibly detailed and, as we're about to see, surprisingly relevant. So, let's get into it.
Okay, so here's our roadmap. Think of it like 5 acts in a play. We'll start with the sacred boundary for the priests, then we'll look at the household rules, and then the standard for the perfect gift. After that, a rule for life, and finally, we get to the big reason behind it all. It's a clear path, so let's jump in.
All right, Act 1. We're starting with the people who are right there on the front lines of holiness, the priests themselves. I mean, these are the guys working closest to the sacred items, so you better believe they had the strictest set of rules.
Okay, let's go verse by verse. Verse 1. Then the Lord spoke to Moses. Simple, direct. The command is coming straight from the top. Now verse 2. God tells Moses to warn Aaron and his sons to separate themselves from the holy things. Picture this. You're in a museum and there's a priceless masterpiece. What's around it? A velvet rope. That's the visual here, a boundary of profound respect. But then, verse 3, man, it raises the stakes big time. Any priest who gets near these holy things while he's ceremonially unclean, well, he shall be cut off from my presence. The consequence is absolute.
And that phrase, cut off. Wow. Just picture it. A giant, heavy, stone door slamming shut. Boom. You're locked out of the very place you were created to be. This wasn't just a slap on the wrist. This was spiritual exile. It shows just how seriously God took profaning what was holy.
So the natural question is, what exactly makes a priest unclean? Well, verse 4 lays out the first conditions. If a priest has a skin disease or some kind of bodily discharge, he can't eat the holy offerings until he's clean. Same goes for anyone who touches a corpse or has an emission. Then verse 5 adds to the list, touching any creeping thing. Yeah, think insects, reptiles, or even just coming into contact with a person who is unclean for any reason. So what's the fix? Verse 6 gives us step 1. If you touch something unclean, you're basically in quarantine until evening and you have to wash your body with water. And verse 7 gives us the final step. Only when the sun goes down are you actually declared clean again. Picture the setting sun as this divine timer going off. Then you can eat the holy food. Finally, verse 8 adds one more rule. A priest can't eat an animal that died on its own or was killed by a predator. You just can't consume death and decay and then turn around and handle something that is perfectly holy.
So here it is, all laid out. It's a clear 4-step process. There's the contact, the waiting period, the washing, and then that final all clear after sunset. And verse 9 tells us exactly why this process is so important. God says essentially, keep my rules or you'll bear sin for it and die. These weren't just suggestions. In this world, they were literally life-saving instructions.
Okay, Act 2. The camera kind of zooms out now. We're moving from just the priest to his entire household. And the big question becomes, who else gets a seat at this very sacred table?
So, verse 10 lays down the law. Nice and simple. No outsider shall eat the holy offering. This isn't for a temporary guest or a hired hand, but then verse 11 draws this really sharp line in the sand. Anyone who is a permanent part of the priest's household, someone born there or a slave he purchased, they are allowed to eat. You see the difference? It's all about belonging, not just being nearby.
And this chart just nails it, right? It boils down to one simple question. Are you a temporary visitor, or are you part of the family? It's not about physical location, it's about permanent belonging. That's the key. Okay, now we get a really specific story, kind of like a case study involving the priest's daughter. Verse 12 tells us that if she marries an outsider, she's now part of his household and she loses her right to eat the holy food. But verse 13 gives her a way back. If she's widowed or divorced and, this is key, has no children to tie her to her husband's family, she can return to her father's house. And when she does, she can eat his food again.
And you can just see her journey here. Right? In the first frame, she's walking away. Her identity is shifting to a new family. But if tragedy strikes and she comes back home, she is welcomed as in her youth, and her place at that sacred table is totally restored. Her belonging is reestablished.
But what if someone messes up, eats the holy food by mistake? Well, verse 14 gives us the oops rule.
And it's not enough to just say sorry. You have to pay back the value of what you ate, plus add a 20% tax on top. It's restitution with interest. And verses 15 and 16 tell us why it's so strict. It's to make sure people don't treat the holy offerings of Israel like they're just common everyday food, and to keep them from carrying the guilt of that mistake.
All right, time for Act 3. We're making a big shift here. We've been talking about the people who can approach God. Now we're going to talk about the gifts they bring. The spotlight is moving from the worshiper to the offering itself.
So verses 17 and 18 get us started, and this command is for all of Israel, including any foreigners living with them. Then verse 19 drops the main rule for an offering to be accepted. It must be a male without blemish, no defects, period. Verse 20 hammers it home. Whatever has a defect, you shall not offer. And just in case you missed it, verse 21 repeats it for peace offerings. It must be perfect to be accepted. The message could not be clearer. God doesn't get the leftovers.
I think it's super specific about what a defect is. Verse 22 lists things like being blind, broken, maimed, or having sores. Then verse 24 adds any animal with injured testicles, bruised, crushed, torn, or cut. The principle is just so clear. You can't just clean out the rejects from your herd and call it a worthy gift. The offering had to reflect the supreme worth of the one who was receiving it. And now the story takes this really fascinating turn. We're shifting from the physical perfection of the animal to these deep principles of compassion and timing that actually reveal something about the heart of God. This is where you see this deep sense of compassion baked right into the law. Verse 26 introduces the next command, and verse 27 says that when a calf, a lamb, or a goat is born, it has to stay with its mother for 7 days. Only from the 8th day on is it considered an acceptable offering. And that number, 7, it's a big deal. It represents a completed cycle. It's like a divinely ordered pause button. It's a recognition of that natural, sacred bond between a mother and her young. Before an animal can be given to God, it's first allowed to just live, to be nurtured. It's a moment of sacred pause. And these principles just keep going. Verse 28 gives us this really powerful command. You do not kill a mother and her baby on the same day. It just shows this profound respect for that life-giving bond. Then, verses 29 and 30 give a rule about Thanksgiving offerings. When you give this gift, you have to eat it that very same day. Why? Because it keeps the act of thanksgiving fresh, immediate, and fully experienced right in the moment of gratitude, not treated like stale leftovers the next day. Okay, here we are, the final act. After all of these detailed instructions about who, what, when, and how, the last 3 verses zoom all the way out to give us the why, the big reason for everything we've just learned. Verse 31 kind of wraps things up with a nice summary. Therefore you shall keep my commandments and perform them. Simple enough? But then verse 32, man, this is the thesis statement for the whole chapter. You shall not profane my holy name, but I will be hallowed among the children of Israel. In other words, all these rules exist for one reason, to set God's name apart as holy. And finally, verse 33 gives us the ultimate motivation behind it all.
And this timeline, this right here, is the whole point. It's the key to understanding everything. Holiness isn't the first step. It's the response to being rescued. The story starts with slavery in Egypt. Then comes the redemption, when God says, I brought you out of the land of Egypt. But the story doesn't end there. He saved them for a purpose, to be your God. All of these rules, all this talk of holiness, it was their ongoing, active response to the incredible story of their rescue. So that leaves us with this one big question to chew on. This whole chapter is about bringing your absolute best, about being set apart, about treating God as holy. If unblemished physical perfection was the standard for a gift back then, what does a worthy gift, a true act of worship, look like for us now? What does it mean for us to bring our best? That's something we're thinking about.